Hey BookTube, it's Sarah and welcome back to my channel, The Book Bag. So today I have another book haul for you. I know I just did one in March, but I bought more books. My work had our staff appreciation at the end of March, and so I ordered a whole bunch of books at an additional discount. So that's the majority of this. I also have a physical ARC and a book I picked up at the thrift shop as well. So those guys are also in here, but the vast majority of it is stuff from my staff appreciation. So to start off, I have two books that I purchased while I was on vacation. I talked about them a little bit in my magical readathon, like Mountains and Magic reading vlog, and I'll link that up top. But the two books I got were Daughters of the Deer by Danielle and The Bookshop of the Brokenhearted by Robert Hillman. So as you can see, I have already read this book. I read it while we were on vacation actually, and it was really good. It's a historical fiction novel that follows an indigenous woman in the 1650s and then her daughter in the 1670s. It follows Marie, who is from the Deer clan, as her clan has like the first contacts with these French settlers, and the women in her community start getting married off to the French settlers. Marie is one of these women, and she ends up having a whole bunch of kids with a French settler named Pierre. And so it kind of follows her first days of having to marry this man, and then later on it follows their daughter, who is Two-Spirit, and her struggles with being Two-Spirit in a white colonizer community, and just the clashing of values and acceptance that she would have if she still lived in her mother's clan versus the fear and hatred that she faces living in like the white French settlement. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it, I think, 4 stars on Goodreads. The prose is like pretty simple. It's nothing super fancy, but it really still gets you with all the emotions that these women are going through. And it's just a really impactful look at kind of the interactions between the indigenous people and the colonizers in the first days. And I really liked that it was seeing like the colonization of Canada through the indigenous people's point of view, because there are a lot of historical fiction books that center white people's point of view, but I really liked seeing historical fiction from an indigenous person's point of view, and kind of really reframes a lot of the things that were taught in school about the pretty, toned down version of colonization, when it was a really pretty horrific and violent period of time that has caused lasting effects through the generations. So I thought this was a really good novel, really important to read, especially if you're Canadian, because this takes place in like what's now Quebec. The other book I still have not read. This is The Bookshop of the Brokenhearted, and this is another historical fiction, but it's set in the 60s, 70s in Australia, but it follows Tom, who's recently abandoned by his wife, and Hannah, who is an immigrant from Hungary who had survived Auschwitz, and kind of their relationship as they become friends running this bookshop and maybe even start to fall for each other. Not sure, but it sounds like a really good book, and I love books about books, so this will scratch that itch. Next up, I have a physical ARC that I got in the mail, which I was super pumped about. So this is I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos from last year, y'all know that One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston was my top book of the year. I loved it so much. It had such great romance and side characters, and like the found family trope was chef's kiss. So I was super excited to get their young adult debut in my hands. I actually got approved on NetGalley to read the ARC, and I read it on NetGalley, and then like a week later the physical ARC showed up. But I'm not mad about it, because I also pre-ordered the Indigo exclusive version that's got, I think it's a blue or a purple cover, but I'm glad to have the green cover as well. So this follows Chloe Green, who was recently kissed by Shara Wheeler, who is like the town's golden girl, and then who then disappears and vanishes, and Chloe is left trying to follow a trail of clues that Shara has left with Shara's boyfriend and Shara's neighbor. So it's the three of them trying to figure out what the heck has happened, why like the queen of their small religious town has just up and left, and also them trying to figure out life. They're at the end of their high school days, and they're also dealing with all of that pressure. Like I mentioned, it's set in a pretty religious small town, and they go to a Christian school. So there's a lot of discussion around religion and sexuality and the homophobic views of the church. So, like, fair warning for that, but I thought this was a really fun read. Chloe was such a strong personality, and like, I don't want to say quite unlikable, but you know, she's got that really hard outer shell that she doesn't let many people pass. She's like kind of grumpy, a little countercultural, if you will. And it was really great having her as a main character and watching her kind of open up and become friends with these other two guys who she had, you know, seen in passing but never really hung out with, and how all of their like love and all of their relationships with Shara kind of brought them to each other. I really liked Smith and Rory as well. They're really interesting side characters. I think Casey McQuiston once again did a great job with the side cast. I feel like this is what the main character from Paper Towns thought he was doing when he was trying to chase after Margot, and it was all like a little bit of a delusion. They're actually chasing Shara. She actually left them clues. Quentin from Paper Towns, eat your heart out. You could never. I really like the romance in it as well. Casey McQuiston always does a great job of romance. It's their real sweet spot. And I think their YA debut is excellent. It feels like they've been writing YA forever. It also has, at the beginning of the chapters, little kind of like memorabilia from the, I call it like the burn pile, like where all the seniors at the end of the year burn all of their class notes and stuff. But there's all these little like notes from people to each other where you kind of get like a sense of the background setting of the story, which I thought was super cool as well. So very impressed. I think I gave this 4 or 5 stars, probably like a 4.5 stars. Doesn't quite have me in a chokehold the way that One Last Stop does, but still really good. And once I get a finished copy, I will definitely be rereading it. So up next, I got Next Year in Havana by Chanel Cleeton, and I found this at the Goodwill near my house, and it was like $2, which is crazy because it's in nearly perfect condition. Like, there's a little bit of damage on the spine, but other than that, it's great. And for like a toonie, incredible. Love. I need to go to thrift stores more often because their books are always so cheap. Anyways, but this is another historical fiction. There's a lot of those in this haul, but historical fiction set in Cuba. So this follows Elisa in 1958 as her family has to flee Cuba during the revolution, and then it also follows Marisol in 2017 as she is scattering Elisa, who is her grandmother's ashes, back in Cuba. So she's returning to like her family's home country and really like learning about family history and the culture, all in context of the Cuban Revolution as well. I saw Jenny from This Story Ain't Over, as well as Olivia from Stories for Coffee. Both of them really like this. I think this is like Olivia's favorite book, or like one of her top books ever. So I'd been kind of eyeing it, but it hadn't been super high on my TBR list. But when I saw it at Goodwill for $2, I was like, why the heck not? And it's got a really gorgeous cover. So excited to pick this one up. So up next are all of the books that I purchased during staff appreciation. There are some that I pre-ordered as well, and they come out in like November for the most part. So obviously I cannot show you those right now, but whenever they come in, I'll do another book haul later in the year because I'm always buying books. It's a curse. But up first is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. As you can see, I reread this one. I had a digital arc of this and I talked about it in my romance arcs video, which I will also link up top and in the description. Hi! She's like, I hate you so much. Here she is, the queen of the house. Okay. But I obviously really liked it. I ended up buying a copy of it and rereading it. It's a sapphic romance between Delilah Green and Claire, who is Delilah's stepsister's childhood friend. And Delilah Green is kind of like the outcast in her town. She never really fit in, and she escaped as soon as she turned 18. So she's coming back to photograph her stepsister's wedding and ends up kind of falling for Claire, who is a single mother who is dealing with being a single mother, and her ex, who is a little unreliable, but who she can't quite keep away from. So this was a really nice romance. The chemistry between them was really great. It has a few steamy scenes, so if you like that, it's got like 3 or 4 of them. I remember reading the arc and finding some of the sex scenes kind of odd, but when I reread it this time, I did not get that same feeling. So I don't know if they were just changed between the arc and this, or if I was just misremembering, but they're much less bizarre in the physical copy. So that was great. And I think this one got a 4 stars on Goodreads as well. Up next is another romance arc that I had that I ended up buying the physical copy for, and that is Loveless and Fancy Ships by Shara, Grunder, Ruiz. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. But this is also about like a love interest that is a single parent. So this follows Joe, who works on like these super yachts as, I don't know, staff on the yacht. So like she brings people food and towels and just make sure that the guests have a great stay. But she's working on this yacht, and she had made a list of 30 things to do before she turned 30. And she had kind of left that to the last minute. She's now almost 30, and so with the help of 2 of her nieces, she's decided to check off the last 8 items on her list, and she ends up kissing a stranger as part of this list, and he ends up being the new chef on board their yacht. So it's this like really interesting setting of working on these like super rich people yachts. It's got a really great love interest. I never thought I would like romances where one of them was a single parent, but it's surprisingly endearing. So I don't know what's up with that. I also plan on rereading this one at some point because it was really cute and just a real grand romp of a book. I think it got 4 stars on Goodreads too. Now finally, we have the books that I have not read yet from Staff Appreciation. So the first one I have is Shakespeare and Company by Sylvia Beach. If you have not heard of this, Shakespeare and Company is a bookstore in Paris. There were 2 iterations of it. There's one that's there currently, and then there's the one that was run by Sylvia Beach, and this one was destroyed in the Nazi invasion of France, I believe. But this one is no longer around, and the Shakespeare and Company that is in Paris now is kind of like inspired by this one. So this is Sylvia Beach's story about creating and running this bookshop that was like a touchstone for Parisian writers and the quote-unquote lost generation. So authors like James Joyce and Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, they all came to this shop regularly. Sylvia Beach actually was the one to publish Ulysses by James Joyce. So I am a little bit obsessed with the current Shakespeare and Company and wanted to learn more about like the history and the shop that had inspired it, because someday I would love to go there. It's beautiful. Like, look it up. It just looks like the most amazing bookstore ever. But I thought this would be a really interesting kind of nonfiction read, and just the cover is really beautiful too. So more books about books. Up next is White Tears, Brown Scars by Ruby Hamad. This is a nonfiction book that explores the dangers of white feminism and how a lot of times it can actually hurt women of color, and how white feminism is a weapon of white supremacy and the patriarchy that hurts Black, Indigenous, and women of color, and kind of the effects of white feminism throughout history. So I've heard really good things about this book. In one of my previous videos, I mentioned a book called Hood Feminism, which I really loved. And I think that was kind of like, almost like an intro course into like intersectional feminism, if you will, and an intro to like why white feminism is bad. Whereas this, I think, is a much deeper and more nuanced look. It sounds really good. And finally, I have The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. So this has been all over TikTok. It was initially published, self-published, and then it was so popular that I think it was Tor, the publishing company, ended up picking it up and publishing it traditionally, and that is the edition I have. I'm not gonna lie, part of the reason I bought this is because it's so pretty, like that cover, but like also like the end papers are amazing. The hardback has got beautiful foil on it, and there's pictures in it of people, so that really swayed me. It's just so pretty that I was like, I want this because it's so gorgeous. And I wasn't entirely sure what it's about. I knew it was like dark academia, but I wasn't like really familiar with the synopsis. It was just so pretty, and I kept seeing it at work and being like, oh my god, it's so gorgeous. So it looks like it follows the Alexandrian Society, who each decade select 6 magicians to try and earn a place in their secret society. So yeah, this follows the 6 recruits of this year as they all try and get into the Alexandrian Society. So it sounds pretty cool. Dark academia, secret societies are always fun, but I'm not gonna lie, it was a cover buy. So those are the 9 books that I purchased recently, mostly through staff appreciation, but a few in like little thrift shops. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if I should like bump them up my TBR a little bit to have them at the top. But I'm really excited about all of them, and I'm really excited to find places on my shelves, which are already pretty full, but we'll fit them in somewhere. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Excuse me. And he is nowhere near as traumatized. Eventually, once I get through my ginormous physical TBR. It's fine. It's fine. We're great.